For 100 years, the kingdom of Aethermoor had lived beneath a single terrifying truth. The Alpha King's wolves belonged to no one. Not the warriors. Not the nobles. Not the healers. Not even the king himself. Stories about them traveled from village to village like whispered warnings carried by the wind. Some said the wolves had been blessed by ancient moon spirits. Others claimed they guarded secrets older than the kingdom itself. Whatever the truth was, nobody dared challenge them. Because everyone who tried paid a price. And on the morning our story begins, the kingdom was about to be reminded why. The central arena overflowed with people. Thousands of eyes watched the royal platform. Children sat on their fathers' shoulders. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Even travelers delayed their journeys. Everyone wanted to witness the annual royal ceremony. Massive banners carrying the Alpha King's crest moved in the cold wind. Silver armor glimmered beneath the sunlight. Royal guards stood like statues. And at the center of it all sat Alpha King Kael, the ruler of Aethermoor, the strongest Alpha alive. His black cloak draped across the throne like darkness itself. His sharp eyes swept across the crowd. No smile touched his face. No emotion escaped him. He looked less like a king and more like a force of nature. Beside him stood two enormous wolves. The sacred royal wolves. Their silver fur shimmered like moonlight. Their eyes glowed gold. Every movement radiated power. The crowd kept their distance. No chains restrained them. No cages contained them. Because everyone knew cages were useless. The wolves obeyed nobody. A nervous silence spread through the arena. Then a young noble warrior stepped forward. Pride filled his face. He bowed dramatically toward the throne. "My king," he announced loudly. "I have trained beasts all my life." Murmurs spread through the crowd. The warrior pointed toward one of the wolves. "I believe the stories are exaggerated." Instantly, several nobles looked nervous. The wolf slowly turned its glowing eyes toward him. But the man continued. "I can tame him." The crowd gasped. High above, dark clouds drifted across the sky. King Kael said nothing. His expression never changed. The warrior mistook the silence for permission. Slowly, he approached. One step. Then another. The entire arena held its breath. The wolf remained still. The warrior smiled. Confidence filled his face. "You see," he laughed. "They fear me." His hand stretched toward the wolf's head. The moment his fingers moved closer, the wolf exploded into motion. A terrifying growl ripped through the arena. The noble never had time to react. The beast slammed into him. Screams erupted everywhere. The man crashed across the stone floor. Blood appeared instantly. Guards rushed forward. Women pulled children close. The wolf stood over the fallen warrior like death itself. Golden eyes burned with warning. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the wolf slowly stepped back. As if reminding everyone exactly who it was. Guards dragged the injured man away. The arena fell silent again. And once more, the kingdom remembered. No one touched the royal wolves. No one. Not for 100 years. Not even the Alpha King. Far below the royal platform, a young Omega carried wooden crates through a service corridor. Nobody noticed her. Nobody ever did. Her name was Lira. 19 years old. Small. Quiet. Forgotten. Her dress was plain. Her hands were rough from work. While nobles watched ceremonies and celebrated power, she spent her days carrying supplies, cleaning halls, and avoiding trouble. Invisible. That was how she survived. Invisible people were harder to hurt. As Lira hurried past the arena entrance, she accidentally glanced toward the royal platform. For only a second. Then she lowered her eyes again. An Omega had no reason to look at kings. No reason to look at sacred wolves. But something strange happened. One of the wolves suddenly lifted its head. Its golden eyes locked onto her. The beast became completely still. Watching. Studying. Curious. Lira never noticed. She disappeared into the crowd. But someone else noticed. King Kael. His eyes narrowed slightly. The wolf had ignored hundreds of people. Yet it watched an Omega servant. Why? The question lingered in his mind long after she vanished. And for the first time in years, something unexpected disturbed the Alpha King's perfect control. Curiosity. Because somewhere inside his instincts, a feeling whispered. Something was about to change. And neither of them knew it yet. The palace looked beautiful from a distance. Its white stone towers touched the clouds. Silver banners danced in the wind. Crystal windows reflected sunlight across the kingdom. Travelers who saw it for the first time often called it magnificent. But beauty could be deceptive. Because behind those shining walls lived people who measured worth by power. Alphas stood at the top. Betas filled the middle. And Omegas. Omegas survived at the bottom. Among them was Lira. Long before sunrise painted the sky, she was already awake. Her day began while the rest of the palace slept. The cold stone floor pressed against her bare feet as she carried buckets through dark hallways. Her hands ached. Her shoulders burned. But she never complained. Complaining only gave cruel people another reason to laugh. The kitchen servants barely looked at her. The guards ignored her. The noble families passed by as though she were a piece of furniture. Sometimes entire conversations happened around her without anyone acknowledging she existed. At first, years ago, that loneliness had hurt. Now it simply felt normal. Lira moved quietly between tables in the royal dining hall. She arranged plates, folded cloth napkins, polished silver cups until they reflected her face. She caught her reflection briefly. Soft brown eyes, tired expression, simple clothes. Nothing special. Nothing important. At least that was what everyone had taught her to believe. A loud voice suddenly interrupted her thoughts. Omega. Lira immediately lowered her head. A noblewoman stood nearby. One of Selene's closest supporters. The woman pointed toward a spilled drink. Clean that. Lira looked down. The drink had been knocked over only moments ago. By the noblewoman herself. But arguing would accomplish nothing. Yes, my lady. She knelt immediately. The noblewoman smirked. At least you're useful for something. Several others laughed. The sound echoed across the hall. Lira remained silent. She cleaned the floor, finished her work, and walked away. But each cruel word stayed inside her chest. Heavy, painful, like stones she carried every day. The palace had taught her many lessons. One of them was simple. People only protected those they valued. And nobody valued an Omega servant. Hours later, the palace came alive. Nobles filled the corridors. Messengers hurried through the halls. Royal advisors discussed politics. Meanwhile, Lira continued working. She carried firewood, delivered food, cleaned guest chambers, fetched water. Her entire day disappeared beneath endless tasks. Yet despite everything, she still found small ways to help others. An elderly cook struggling with heavy pots. A stable worker nursing an injured hand. A frightened servant girl crying after being yelled at. Lira helped them all. Not because she expected gratitude, but because kindness was the only thing nobody had managed to take from her. And perhaps that was why fate had been watching her all along. Near sunset, trouble arrived. Lunar Selene entered the eastern corridor. Instantly, servants stepped aside. Conversations stopped. Even guards straightened their posture. Selene enjoyed that reaction. She enjoyed power. She enjoyed fear. Most of all, she enjoyed reminding others of their place. Her beauty was undeniable. Golden hair, elegant dresses, perfect posture. Everything about her screamed royalty. Many believed she would soon become Lunar Queen beside King Kael. Selene certainly believed it. As she walked through the corridor, her sharp eyes found Lira immediately. A slow smile appeared. The kind that never brought good news. Look who we have here. Several noblewomen laughed before Lira even spoke. Lira lowered her gaze. My lady. Selene circled her like a hunter examining prey. Tell me, Omega. Her voice dripped with amusement. Did you enjoy the ceremony today? Lira remained careful. Yes, my lady. Selene leaned closer. Did you imagine yourself standing beside the king? More laughter. Lira shook her head quickly. No. Good. Selene smiled. Because dreams can be dangerous. The corridor fell silent. Everyone understood the warning. Know your place. Stay beneath us. Never reach higher. Selene's eyes narrowed. For a brief moment, something dark flashed across her expression. She had noticed the same thing Kael had noticed. One of the wolves watching Lira. The memory irritated her. The wolves ignored everyone, including her. Yet somehow they had reacted to a servant. It made no sense. And Selene hated things she couldn't control. Leave, she ordered. Lira obeyed instantly. She hurried away before more humiliation could follow. But Selene continued watching her retreating figure. A strange feeling twisted inside her chest. Not fear. Not yet. But something close. Because sometimes the greatest threats arrived from places nobody expected. And Selene had learned never to ignore unusual signs. Night eventually settled over the palace. Stars appeared above the kingdom. Most servants prepared to sleep. But Lira had one final stop. Her favorite stop. The stables. A small building near the edge of palace grounds. Hidden away from nobles and royal politics. A place where nobody cared about status. A place where someone waited for her. Lira entered quietly. The scent of hay filled the air. Horses shifted gently inside their stalls. A small figure sat in the corner. The moment he saw her, his face lit up. Rowan. The orphan wolf pup. Only 8 years old. Thin. Quiet. Fragile. Years earlier, raiders had destroyed his village. The trauma stole his voice. Since then, he had not spoken a single word. Many people viewed him as broken. Others ignored him completely. Only Lira treated him like he mattered. Hello, Rowan. The boy smiled immediately. He rushed toward her. Lira laughed softly. One of the few genuine laughs she ever allowed herself. Rowan handed her a small piece of paper. A drawing. The picture showed a wolf. Beside it stood a girl. And next to them stood a small boy. Lyra's eyes softened. You made this. Rowan nodded proudly. The drawing wasn't perfect. The lines were uneven. The proportions were wrong. But to Lira, it looked beautiful. Because someone had made it for her. No one ever made things for her. No one except Rowan. She sat beside him. Together they shared bread she had secretly saved from dinner. The boy ate carefully. Every bite mattered. Lira watched him with concern. He was growing. But still too thin. Too many people forgot he existed. Sometimes she feared what would happen if she wasn't there. The thought hurt more than she wanted to admit. After they finished eating, she repaired a tear in his coat. Rowan sat patiently while she worked. The stable lantern cast warm light across the room. For a little while, everything felt peaceful. No insults. No cruelty. No nobles. Just two lonely souls keeping each other company. Eventually Rowan reached into a small wooden box. His movements became hesitant. Nervous. Careful. Then he pulled something out. A tiny wooden wolf. Hand-carved. Rough around the edges. But clearly made with love. Lira froze. Rowan extended it toward her. Her eyes widened. For me. The boy nodded. Slowly. Hope shining in his eyes. Lira accepted the carving with trembling fingers. For several seconds she couldn't speak. Nobody had ever given her a gift before. Not once. Not in 19 years. She stared at the tiny wolf. Every scratch. Every carved detail. Every hour Rowan must have spent making it. Emotion tightened her throat. It's beautiful. Rowan smiled. A real smile. The kind that transformed his entire face. Lira felt tears threatening to appear. She hugged the wooden wolf against her chest. Thank you. The boy seemed relieved. As though her happiness mattered deeply to him. And it did. Because to Rowan, Lira wasn't just a servant. She wasn't just an omega. She was family. The only family he had left. Outside the stable, shadows moved. A figure stood hidden among the darkness. Watching. Listening. Selene's spy. A palace servant loyal to the future Luna. The spy observed everything. The food. The gift. The conversations. Most importantly, the bond. A slow smile appeared on the spy's face. Information was power. And Selene loved power. Inside the stable, Lira remained unaware. She continued talking softly with Rowan. Sharing stories. Making him laugh. Creating one small pocket of happiness in a world determined to crush it. But danger had already begun moving toward them. And neither of them knew it. Hours later, Rowan finally fell asleep. Lira gently covered him with a blanket. For several moments she simply sat beside him. Watching. Protecting. The same way she always did. Then she looked down at the wooden wolf in her hands. Moonlight touched its surface. A simple gift. Yet somehow it felt more valuable than all the treasures inside the palace. Because it represented something she rarely experienced. Being seen. Being appreciated. Being loved. A single tear escaped her eye. She wiped it away quickly. Then she whispered words nobody else heard. "Thank you, Rowan." Outside, cold winds swept across the kingdom. Clouds slowly gathered in the distance. A storm was coming. Not just across the sky, but across their lives. Far away, inside her luxurious chambers, Selene listened as the spy delivered his report. Every detail. Every observation. Every secret. The future Luna listened carefully. Then she smiled. A dangerous smile. Because she already knew how to use the information. And when Selene decided to destroy someone, she never stopped halfway. Meanwhile, Lira returned to her tiny servant room. Exhaustion weighed heavily on her body. She placed the wooden wolf beside her bed. Then she lay down. For the first time in a long while, a small smile remained on her face. She didn't know powerful eyes had begun watching her. She didn't know destiny had quietly started moving. She didn't know the sacred wolves themselves would soon change her life forever. All she knew was that one small boy had given her a reason to believe she wasn't completely alone. And sometimes, that was enough to keep a broken heart beating for another day. But beyond the palace walls, snow clouds gathered over the forbidden forest. And before another night passed, Lira would find herself standing before creatures no human had touched in 100 years. Creatures that should have torn her apart. Instead, they would choose her. The next morning arrived beneath a sky the color of steel. Dark clouds stretched across the horizon. Cold winds swept through the kingdom. Servants whispered that a storm was coming. Hunters returned early from the forest. Farmers rushed to secure their animals. Even the birds seemed restless. Nature itself felt uneasy, as though something hidden was moving beneath the surface of the world. Inside the palace, Lira continued her duties as always. She carried baskets, cleaned corridors, delivered meals. Yet despite the endless work, her thoughts kept drifting back to the small wooden wolf sitting beside her bed. The gift Rowan had made. Nobody had ever given her something so precious. The memory warmed her heart. Especially on a day as cold as this one. By afternoon, snow had already begun falling. At first it came gently. Tiny flakes drifting from the sky. Beautiful. Peaceful. But everyone knew winter storms in Aethermoor could become dangerous very quickly. The palace guards began closing certain gates. Messengers hurried through the halls. Stable workers rushed to secure the horses. Meanwhile, Lira searched for Rowan. She normally saw him before sunset. Every day. Without fail. But today he was nowhere to be found. She checked the stables. Nothing. She checked the storage sheds. Nothing. She asked several workers. Nobody had seen him. A knot formed inside her stomach. Rowan never wandered far. Never. Not during winter. Not during storms. The deeper the evening grew, the stronger her worry became. Snow fell harder. Wind howled against palace walls. Still no Rowan. Finally, unable to ignore her instincts any longer, Lira wrapped herself in a thick cloak and slipped outside. The storm greeted her immediately. Ice-cold wind slapped against her face. Snow swirled through the darkness. Visibility shrank with every passing minute. Rowan. Her voice disappeared into the wind. No answer came. Fear tightened inside her chest. The forest beyond the palace stood dark and silent. Most people avoided it after sunset, especially during storms. Stories surrounded those woods. Ancient stories. Stories about spirits, predators, forgotten ruins, and worse. Yet Rowan was still missing. Nothing else mattered. Lira stepped into the storm. Snow crunched beneath her boots. Trees swayed violently overhead. Branches creaked like old bones. The deeper she walked, the quieter the world became. Soon even the palace lights vanished behind her. Only darkness remained. And the storm. Rowan. She called again. Nothing. The wind answered with a mournful howl. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Her fingers grew numb. Snow collected on her cloak. Still she continued searching. Because Rowan would never stop looking for her. And she refused to stop looking for him. Suddenly something caught her attention. Tracks. Fresh tracks in the snow. Small footprints. A child's. Relief flooded her chest. Rowan. She followed them immediately. The footprints led deeper into forbidden territory. An area marked by ancient stone pillars. A place the palace specifically warned people to avoid. Lira hesitated. Only for a second. Then she continued. Because fear mattered less than finding Rowan. The tracks wound between trees. Across frozen ground. Toward a distant clearing. And then. They disappeared. Completely. Lira stopped. Confusion filled her face. The footprints ended abruptly. As though whoever made them had vanished into thin air. The storm intensified. Snow whipped across her vision. For several moments she stood frozen. Unsure where to go next. Then she heard it. A sound. Faint. Weak. Painful. A low growl carried by the wind. Every muscle in her body tightened. Slowly she turned toward the sound. The growl came again. Not threatening. Not aggressive. Suffering. Lira's heart pounded. She knew she should leave. She knew she should return to the palace. But curiosity pulled her forward. Step by cautious step, she followed the sound. Through snow. Through darkness. Until she reached the edge of a clearing. And what she saw there nearly stopped her heart. Two enormous wolves lay in the snow. Silver fur. Massive bodies. Golden eyes. The royal wolves. The Alpha King's sacred wolves. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Everyone in the kingdom knew these creatures. Everyone feared them. Yet now they looked broken. One wolf lay motionless beside a fallen tree. Blood stained its silver fur. An arrow protruded from its shoulder. The second wolf was barely standing. Its side rose and fell with painful breaths. Another arrow had pierced its ribs. Fresh blood stained the snow beneath them. The sight was horrifying. The mighty beasts looked vulnerable. Wounded. Dying. Lira's first instinct was to run. Every story she had ever heard screamed inside her mind. Danger. Death. Run. But then she looked closer. The wolves weren't growling. They weren't threatening her. They were suffering. And suffering was something Lira understood all too well. The standing wolf noticed her. Golden eyes locked onto hers. Instantly her body froze. This was the moment. The moment it attacked. The moment she died. The wolf took one step forward. Then another. Lira couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The beast stopped only a few feet away. Its eyes remained fixed on her. Then something unexpected happened. The wolf stumbled. Its legs gave way. And it collapsed into the snow. A small sound escaped its throat. Pain. Pure pain. Lira stared. Shock flooding every corner of her mind. The wolf wasn't hunting her. It was barely surviving. The storm raged around them. Snow gathered across their fur. The wounded creatures shivered violently. And suddenly one terrible realization struck her. If she walked away, they would die. A normal person would have left. A smart person would have left. But Lira had never been able to ignore suffering. no matter the cost. Slowly she approached. Every step felt dangerous. Every instinct screamed at her to stop. Yet she continued. The wolf watched her. Its breathing rough. Its eyes exhausted. Lira knelt beside it. Close enough now to see the blood soaking its fur. Close enough to see the arrow. Her hands trembled. You poor thing. The words slipped out softly. The wolf didn't react. Didn't attack. Didn't growl. It simply watched her. As though trying to understand why she remained. Lira swallowed hard. Then carefully reached toward the arrow. The moment her fingers touched the shaft, she closed her eyes. Expecting teeth. Expecting claws. Expecting death. Nothing happened. Slowly she opened her eyes. The wolf remained still. Trusting. The realization stunned her. No one touched these wolves. No one. Yet somehow. She just had. Snow continued falling. The storm showed no mercy. If she wanted to save them, she had to move quickly. I'm sorry. Her voice shook. This will hurt. She gripped the arrow. The wolf tensed immediately. Pain flashed across its face. Then Lira pulled. The arrow came free. A terrible sound escaped the beast. Blood followed instantly. Lira pressed cloth against the wound. Her heart hammered wildly. For several seconds she thought she had made things worse. Then the bleeding began slowing. Relief washed through her. One down. One to go. The second wolf watched everything. Its glowing eyes never left her. Lira approached carefully. This wound looked worse. Far worse. The arrow had struck deeper. The wolf trembled from pain. Snow covered its back. Ice clung to its fur. The poor creature was freezing. Lyra's chest tightened. No living thing deserved this. Not even the most feared beast in the kingdom. Again she apologized. Again she reached for the arrow. Again she expected violence. Again it never came. The wolf lowered its head. Almost as if granting permission. Lira carefully removed the second arrow. Blood flowed. The wolf growled softly. Not at her. At the pain. Tears filled Lyra's eyes. The sound broke her heart. There. She pressed cloth against the wound. It's okay. The words came naturally. The same words she used with Rowan. The same words she used whenever someone needed comfort. It's okay. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. Slowly the bleeding stopped. The wolves remained alive. Barely. But alive. Unfortunately another problem remained. The storm. Temperatures continued dropping. The wolves were already weak. If they stayed exposed, they would freeze. Lira looked around desperately. A small rock formation stood nearby. Partially sheltered from the wind. Not perfect. But better than nothing. Getting the wolves there seemed impossible. Until something remarkable happened. The larger wolf slowly rose. It staggered. Nearly fell. Then walked toward the rocks. The second wolf followed. As if understanding exactly what she wanted. Lira blinked. The creatures weren't just listening. They were cooperating. The realization felt unreal. Inside the shelter, she spread blankets from her emergency pack. Not enough. Nowhere near enough. But all she had. The wolves lay down. Exhaustion evident in every movement. Lira wrapped the blankets around them as best she could. Then she sat nearby. Trying to shield them from the wind. Hours passed. Darkness deepened. Snow continued falling. The storm trapped them all together. Lira should have been terrified. Instead she felt something unexpected. Sadness. Because despite their fearsome reputation, these wolves looked lonely. Wounded. Abandoned. For the first time, she wondered what their lives must be like. Feared by everyone. Trusted by no one. Expected to be monsters. A strange sense of understanding connected them. Perhaps loneliness recognized loneliness. The larger wolf slowly lifted its head. Its golden eyes met hers. Then, with incredible gentleness, it moved closer. Lira froze. The wolf rested its massive head against her shoulder. Warm. Heavy. Trusting. A gasp escaped her lips. The beast sighed softly, almost content, almost peaceful. Tears filled her eyes again, because somehow she understood what the gesture meant. Trust. The creature trusted her. The most feared wolf in the kingdom trusted an Omega servant. A few moments later, the second wolf moved closer too, curling beside them. The storm roared outside. Yet within the shelter, something miraculous happened. The wolves relaxed. Their breathing slowed. Their tension faded. Safe. For the first time in what felt like forever. They felt safe. And then they fell asleep. Both of them. Sleeping peacefully against her. Lira stared in disbelief. The legendary royal wolves. The untouchable wolves. The wolves who attacked anyone that approached. Were sleeping in her arms. The impossible had become reality. Yet she never saw the figures hidden beyond the storm. Royal scouts. Returning from a border patrol. They had witnessed everything. Every moment. Every impossible second. The lead scout could barely believe his eyes. Moon goddess. Another scout stared. This can't be real. But it was. The wolves slept peacefully beside the Omega. The same wolves that had rejected everyone else for 100 years. The scouts exchanged stunned looks. There was only one thing to do. Inform the Alpha King. Immediately. Within seconds they mounted their horses. Racing through the storm. Toward the palace. Toward King Kael. Toward a future none of them could imagine. Back in the shelter, Lira remained unaware. Exhaustion pulled at her eyes. The wolves' warmth protected her from the cold. Outside, the storm continued raging. Inside, something ancient had quietly changed. A bond had formed. A connection nobody understood. And before sunrise arrived, the entire kingdom would learn the impossible truth. The sacred wolves had finally chosen someone. Not a king. Not a warrior. Not a noble. An Omega. And nothing would ever be the same again. The storm showed no mercy. All night, snow had fallen across the kingdom like a white curtain drawn over the world. The forests disappeared beneath ice. Roads became nearly invisible. Even the strongest warriors preferred the safety of stone walls during such weather. Yet inside the Alpha King's palace, no one was sleeping. Because impossible news had arrived. News so unbelievable that several guards thought the scouts had lost their minds. The lead scout stood in the royal war chamber, soaked from the storm, breathing heavily. Snow still clung to his cloak. His hands trembled. Not from the cold. From what he had seen. The room was silent. Every officer stared at him. Every advisor waited. And at the far end of the chamber stood King Kael. Tall. Still. Unreadable. His silver eyes remained fixed on the scout. Repeat it. His voice was calm. But everyone in the room felt the power behind those two words. The scout swallowed. My king. For a moment he almost doubted himself. The memory still felt impossible. Then he continued. We found the royal wolves in the northern forest. A murmur spread through the chamber. Kael's expression remained unchanged. Wounded. The room instantly became tense. Several officers exchanged worried looks. The sacred wolves wounded. That alone sounded unbelievable. But the scout was not finished. We also found someone with them. Kael's eyes narrowed slightly. Who? The scout hesitated. Then finally answered. An Omega servant. Silence. Absolute silence. Several men frowned. One advisor looked confused. Another laughed nervously. But nobody interrupted. Because the scout's face showed no signs of joking. What happened? Kael asked. The scout inhaled slowly. The wolves allowed her to touch them. A chair scraped loudly against stone. One of the officers stood up. Impossible. The scout ignored him. They allowed her to remove the arrows. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The storm howled outside the palace windows. Inside, disbelief consumed the room. Then the scout delivered the final blow. They fell asleep in her arms. The room erupted. That's absurd. His mistaken. No Omega could. Silence. Kael never raised his voice. He didn't need to. The entire chamber immediately obeyed. The Alpha King looked toward the scout. Are you certain? The answer came without hesitation. Yes, my king. Kael studied him carefully. The scout had served for years. Loyal. Honest. Reliable. Not a man who invented stories. Which meant one thing. He believed every word. And somehow that made the situation even more disturbing. For 100 years the royal wolves had rejected everyone. Even him. Especially him. The wolves respected him. Protected the kingdom beside him. Yet they remained untouchable. Independent. Wild. Ancient. No one understood why. No one had ever changed that. Until now. An image flashed through Kael's mind. The Omega servant from the ceremony. The girl one wolf had watched. Lira. A strange feeling stirred inside him. Curiosity. The same feeling that had followed him since the arena. Now it returned stronger than before. Much stronger. Finally he turned toward his commanders. Prepare the riders. The room froze. One officer blinked. My king, in this storm. Kael fastened his cloak. Now. The discussion ended immediately. Because when King Kael made a decision, nobody questioned it twice. Within minutes, the palace exploded into activity. Torches illuminated the courtyard. Horses were prepared. Weapons checked. Armor secured. Elite royal guards assembled in formation. Snow swirled around them. The storm remained dangerous. But nobody dared refuse the king's order. Meanwhile, Kael stood beside his black war horse. His expression revealed nothing. Yet beneath that calm exterior, thoughts moved rapidly. Who was this girl? Why had the wolves accepted her? What had happened in the forest? Most importantly, why did he feel compelled to see it with his own eyes? The questions followed him as he mounted his horse. Then the royal party rode into the storm. The journey was brutal. Snow reduced visibility. Ice covered the trails. Several times horses nearly lost their footing. Yet Kael never slowed. The wolves were not merely animals. They were symbols of the kingdom. Guardians of ancient traditions. If someone had attacked them, answers were needed. And if the scouts spoke the truth, then answers were only the beginning. Hours passed. The forest finally appeared through the snowfall. Dark trees stretched endlessly across the frozen landscape. The riders pushed deeper. Following the scouts' directions. Following the tracks. Following destiny itself. Eventually the lead scout raised his hand. There! Everyone stopped. Ahead stood a rocky shelter partially hidden by snow. The scout pointed. They're inside. For a moment nobody moved. The storm seemed quieter now. Almost as though the forest itself was holding its breath. Kael dismounted first. His boots sank into the snow. The guards followed. Slowly. Carefully. No one wanted to provoke the wolves. One wrong move could become fatal. The group approached. Every step increased the tension. Then they reached the entrance. And saw the impossible. The world seemed to stop. Inside the shelter sat Lira. Curled beneath a blanket. Fast asleep. One royal wolf rested against her shoulder. The second lay beside her. Their massive bodies surrounded her protectively. Peacefully. As though they belonged together. Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. The sight shattered everything they believed. One guard rubbed his eyes. Certain he was hallucinating. Another simply stared. Unable to process what he was seeing. These were the same wolves that had attacked warriors. The same wolves that trusted nobody. Yet now they looked completely relaxed. Content. Safe. Kael remained motionless. His gaze fixed on the sleeping trio. Something strange tightened inside his chest. The wolves looked different. Not weaker. Not submissive. Simply calm. A calm he had never witnessed before. For years he had stood beside them. Commanded battles alongside them. Protected the kingdom with them. Yet they had never looked at him the way they looked at her. The realization unsettled him, more than he cared to admit. One of the guards accidentally shifted his footing. The sound echoed softly. Instantly both wolves awoke. Golden eyes snapped open. A low growl filled the shelter. Every soldier froze. The atmosphere changed immediately. The wolves stood. Power radiated from their enormous forms. Danger returned. Yet something remarkable happened. The wolves didn't position themselves against Lira. They positioned themselves in front of her, protecting her. From them, several guards exchanged shocked looks. The sacred wolves were guarding an omega. Kael stepped forward carefully. The wolves watched him, neither attacking nor retreating, just watching. Then Lira stirred. Slowly she opened her eyes. For several seconds she looked confused. Sleep still clouded her thoughts. Then she noticed the soldiers, the armor, the weapons, the king. Her face immediately lost all color. Fear crashed into her. She scrambled backward, heart pounding wildly. The realization struck like lightning. The Alpha King, standing directly in front of her. Lira instantly dropped to her knees. "I am sorry." Her voice shook. "I didn't mean." Words failed her. What exactly had she done? Touched the wolves? Entered forbidden territory? Interfered with royal property? Any of those crimes could destroy her life. "I found them wounded," she whispered. "I only wanted to help." Silence followed. Lira kept her head lowered, too terrified to look up. Meanwhile the guards waited. Everyone expected Kael to speak. Expected judgment. Expected orders. Instead, the Alpha King simply stared. Studying her. The frightened Omega. The girl who had accomplished what nobody else could. Snow drifted through the shelter entrance. The wolves remained near her, neither leaving nor relaxing, as though waiting to see how the king would respond. Finally Kael spoke. "Were they alone?" Lira looked up slightly. "My king." "The wolves." His voice remained calm. "When you found them?" Lira swallowed. "Yes." "Wounded?" "Very badly." Kael's jaw tightened slightly. Someone had attacked them. The realization fueled his anger. But another question mattered first. "Why did you help them?" Lira blinked. The answer seemed obvious. They were hurt. The simplicity of her response surprised everyone, including him. No mention of rewards. No mention of recognition. No ambition. Just compassion. They were hurt. So she helped. Kael studied her carefully, searching for deception. Finding none. For the first time, curiosity deepened into something else. Something more complicated. One of the wolves suddenly moved closer to Lira. Its massive head gently brushed her shoulder. The gesture stunned the entire group. Even now, even with soldiers surrounding them, the wolf sought comfort from her. Not from the king. Not from anyone else. Her. The sight left an impression Kael could not ignore. Eventually he turned toward his men. "Bring blankets." The order surprised several guards. Yet nobody questioned it. Minutes later, supplies arrived. The wounded wolves received treatment. Food. Water. Medical attention. Throughout everything, they remained close to Lira. As if afraid she might disappear. The bond became impossible to deny. And every passing moment attracted more attention. Whispers spread among the soldiers. The Omega. The wolves. The miracle. By the time preparations were complete, everyone knew this story would reach the kingdom. The only question was how people would react. Kael already suspected the answer. Fear. Suspicion. Chaos. Because people feared what they couldn't understand. And there was nothing understandable about this situation. As the group prepared to leave, another challenge emerged. The wolves refused to move. Not unless Lira moved first. The soldiers tried everything. Commands. Encouragement. Distance. Nothing worked. The wolves ignored everyone. Then Lira cautiously stood. Immediately both wolves rose beside her. The entire group fell silent. The message could not have been clearer. Where she went, they would follow. Kael watched the scene carefully, then made another decision. Lira. She immediately lowered her head. Yes, my king. You will return to the palace. Fear flashed across her face. Punishment. Interrogation. Humiliation. Countless possibilities raced through her mind. Yet Kael's next words surprised her. Under my protection. The forest seemed to go silent. Several guards looked shocked. Lira herself looked confused. Protected. Why? She was nobody. An Omega servant. Nothing more. But the Alpha King's expression revealed nothing. His gaze remained fixed on the wolves. And perhaps that was answer enough. The journey back to the palace felt unreal. Lira rode beneath heavy blankets, surrounded by guards. The wolves remained nearby, never leaving her side. Meanwhile Kael rode ahead. Silent. Thoughtful. The storm gradually weakened. Yet another storm was already forming. One inside the palace. Because news traveled quickly. And by the time they reached the gates, rumors had already begun. Servants gathered in secret corners. Guards whispered among themselves. Nobles demanded answers. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Why had the wolves chosen an Omega? Nobody knew. But soon the entire kingdom would become obsessed with finding out. And hidden behind palace windows, Lunar Selene watched their arrival. Her beautiful face remained calm. But her eyes darkened the moment she saw the wolves walking beside Lira. The moment she saw King Kael watching her. Something cold settled inside Selene's heart. Danger. For the first time, she saw the Omega not as a servant, but as a threat. And Selene had never allowed threats to survive for long. Unaware of the growing storm around her, Lira stepped through the palace gates. The wolves followed. The guards watched. The nobles whispered. The king remained silent. And somewhere deep inside the ancient instincts of the royal wolves, a choice had already been made. A choice that would soon shake the entire kingdom. Because the wolves had accepted someone. And once the sacred wolves chose, they never changed their minds. The moment the palace gates closed behind them, the whispers began. At first they were quiet. Small. Harmless. A servant sharing a rumor in the kitchen. A guard repeating a story in the barracks. A stable worker telling another worker what he had heard. But rumors were like sparks. And in a palace full of pride, fear, and ambition, sparks became fires very quickly. By sunrise, the entire kingdom seemed to know. The sacred wolves had chosen an Omega. Not a noble. Not a warrior. Not a future Lunar. An Omega servant. And nobody knew what to do with that information. Lira certainly didn't. She spent the first night in a small guest chamber near the royal healers. Not because she was important. Because nobody knew where else to place her. The wolves refused to leave. Twice they had attempted to guide the wolves back to their royal sanctuary. Twice the wolves had ignored every command. The second attempt had ended with several terrified guards climbing onto tables while one of the wolves stood growling at the door. Not because it wanted to attack anyone. Because it wanted to stay near Lira. Eventually everyone gave up. The wolves remained. And that only made the rumors worse. Lira sat quietly on the edge of her bed. A bowl of untouched soup rested nearby. The room felt too large. Too quiet. Too strange. Just yesterday she had been invisible. Today half the palace seemed to be talking about her. The thought made her stomach twist. One of the wolves lay sleeping near the fireplace. The other rested beside the door, protecting every entrance. Protecting her. The sight still felt unreal. Lira looked toward them. I don't understand. The wolf near the fireplace opened one eye. Its tail moved slightly. That simple reaction almost made her laugh. It felt ridiculous. Talking to creatures who could probably crush stone with their jaws. Yet somehow she felt safer with them nearby. Safer than she had ever felt around people. A knock suddenly interrupted her thoughts. The door opened. A healer stepped inside. An older woman with kind eyes. One of the few people in the palace who treated servants with respect. The healer smiled gently. How are you feeling? Lira immediately stood. I'm fine. The healer raised an eyebrow. That's not what I asked. For a moment Lira hesitated. Then the truth slipped out. I'm scared. The woman nodded. As you should be. Lira blinked. The answer surprised her. The healer sat beside her. Child, people fear what they don't understand. She glanced toward the wolves. And nobody understands this. Lira lowered her gaze. I didn't do anything. I know. But others won't care. The words settled heavily inside the room. Because both women knew they were true. The healer sighed. You should be careful. Lira swallowed. Of what? The healer's expression darkened. Of powerful people who suddenly feel threatened. Far across the palace, another woman was already proving that warning correct. Selene stood before a large mirror. Servants adjusted her dress. Jewelry sparkled around her neck. Everything appeared perfect. Yet anger simmered beneath the surface. She had barely slept. Every report she received made things worse. The wolves remained beside Lira. The king had personally escorted her home. The servants wouldn't stop talking. The entire situation irritated her. Because attention was power. And attention was shifting. Away from her. Toward an omega. Selene hated that. She stared at her reflection. Beautiful. Elegant. Future Luna. Everything she had worked for her entire life. Then one thought ruined it all. The wolves had never looked at her the way they looked at Lira. Not once. The memory burned. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Enter. A servant stepped inside. One of her spies. The man bowed immediately. My lady. Selene turned. What now? The servant hesitated. Then answered carefully. The palace is discussing the Omega constantly. Selene's eyes narrowed. How unfortunate. The stories are spreading beyond the palace. That answer pleased her even less. Rumors spreading beyond the palace meant public interest. Public interest created opportunities. But it also created risks. Especially if people started viewing Lira as something special. Something chosen. Something important. Selene refused to allow that. She walked slowly toward the window. Snow still covered the kingdom outside. The world looked calm. Peaceful. Beautiful. But appearances often lied. Just like people. Tell me, Selene said quietly. What happens when people encounter something they cannot explain? The servant remained silent. Selene answered her own question. They create explanations. A slow smile appeared. And suddenly the servant understood. The future Luna wasn't planning to stop the rumors. She was planning to control them. Hours later, new whispers appeared. Different whispers. Darker whispers. Nobody knew exactly where they began. Yet somehow they spread rapidly. The Omega used forbidden magic. The wolves were enchanted. Ancient witchcraft was involved. The girl wasn't blessed. She was dangerous. The stories moved through the palace like poison. Every retelling made them worse. Every conversation added new details. Soon people spoke with certainty about events they knew nothing about. Fear replaced curiosity. And fear always spread faster. Lira noticed the change immediately. Servants who had once ignored her now stared openly. Some looked nervous. Others looked suspicious. A few looked afraid. As though she might transform into a monster at any moment. The reactions hurt more than she expected. Because she hadn't changed. She was still the same person. Yet everyone suddenly treated her differently. One afternoon she entered the palace kitchen. Conversations stopped instantly. Silence filled the room. Dozens of eyes turned toward her. Lira froze. The atmosphere felt wrong. Uncomfortable. One servant quickly stepped aside. Another made a protective gesture against evil. The sight hit like a punch. Lira lowered her head. Collected her supplies. And left without speaking. Behind her, the whispers resumed. Quieter. But impossible to miss. By evening, She felt completely exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. The attention weighed on her. The suspicion weighed on her. Everything weighed on her. The wolves sensed it. Animals often understood emotions better than humans. As she sat alone in a courtyard garden, one wolf approached quietly. It lowered itself beside her. Close enough for warmth. Close enough for comfort. Lira smiled weakly. You know. She stroked the wolf's silver fur. I think you're causing all my problems. The wolf huffed softly. Its tail moved once. The simple reaction made her laugh. A real laugh. Small. Brief. But genuine. For a few moments, her sadness faded. Unfortunately, someone else witnessed the interaction. A group of noblewomen stood nearby. Watching. Judging. One of them shook her head. Disgusting. Another crossed her arms. She's controlling them somehow. Of course she is. None of them noticed King Kael standing nearby. The Alpha King had arrived only moments earlier. And he heard everything. His expression hardened. The women immediately lowered their heads. Fear replacing arrogance. My king. Kael said nothing. His gaze shifted toward Lira. She hadn't noticed him. She remained focused on the wolf beside her. For some reason, he continued watching. The more time passed, the stranger the situation felt. Every report he received told the same story. The wolves followed her everywhere. Protected her constantly. Responded to her emotions. Nothing about it made sense. Yet the bond was real. Impossible to deny. Lira suddenly looked up. Their eyes met. Immediately she stood. Nervousness returning. My king. Kael approached slowly. The wolf remained calm. A detail he noticed immediately. The beasts tolerated few people. Yet they tolerated him more easily when she was present. Interesting. How are the wolves? The question surprised her. She blinked. Then answered honestly. They're healing. Kael nodded. And you? The question surprised her even more. Nobody usually asked how she was. For several seconds she didn't know what to say. Finally she whispered. I'm trying. Something about that answer lingered in his mind. Because it sounded genuine. Not political. Not manipulative. Just honest. Before he could reply, another voice interrupted. My king. Selene. She approached gracefully. Beautiful as always. Confident as always. Yet Kael noticed the irritation hidden behind her smile. Selene's gaze briefly touched Lira. Cold. Sharp. Dangerous. Then it returned to Kael. The council requests your presence. Kael nodded. The moment passed. He left. Selene remained. Silence followed. The garden suddenly felt colder. Lira lowered her gaze immediately. Selene stepped closer. Too close. You should be careful. Lira frowned slightly. My lady. Selene smiled. A smile without kindness. Attention can be dangerous. The warning sounded polite. But the threat beneath it was obvious. Lira felt it immediately. Selene leaned closer. Especially for someone who doesn't belong. Then she walked away. Leaving silence behind. Leaving fear behind. Leaving uncertainty behind. That night, Lira couldn't sleep. The palace felt different now. Hostile. Unpredictable. The walls seemed filled with eyes. Filled with whispers. Filled with judgment. She sat beside the window watching snow fall outside. The wolves slept nearby. Guarding her. Protecting her. Yet for the first time, she wondered if even they could protect her from what was coming. Because the rumors weren't slowing down. They were growing. And somewhere inside the palace, someone was feeding them. Someone powerful. Someone dangerous. The answer arrived the following morning. A royal announcement echoed through the halls. Servants stopped working. Nobles gathered. Guards exchanged confused looks. Everyone listened. A public hearing would be held. The entire court would attend. Questions regarding the royal wolves would be addressed. Witnesses would be questioned. Evidence would be presented. And at the center of everything would be Lira. The moment she heard the announcement, her blood ran cold. A hearing. A public hearing. Which meant accusations. Judgment. Humiliation. Fear tightened around her heart. The wolves sensed her distress immediately. Both rose to their feet. Alert. Protective. Ready. But even they couldn't stop what had already begun. Across the palace, Selene stood before her mirror once again. This time she looked pleased. Very pleased. The trap was set. The rumors had spread. The fear had grown. Now all that remained was the final step. A public accusation. Because people often preferred frightening lies over simple truths. And Selene intended to use that weakness perfectly. She picked up a crystal goblet, studying her reflection in the glass. Then smiled. A slow, victorious, dangerous smile. Soon the entire kingdom would be watching. Soon the Omega would stand alone. And when that happened, Selene intended to destroy her completely. Unaware of how far the conspiracy had already spread, Lira stood in her room staring at the palace courtyard below. The wolves remained beside her. The kingdom whispered about her. The future Luna plotted against her. And somewhere deep inside her heart, a terrible feeling grew stronger. The feeling that her life was about to change again. Not for the better. For the worse. Far worse. Because the hearing wasn't meant to discover the truth. It was meant to create a villain. And in the eyes of the kingdom, that villain was about to be her. Morning arrived beneath a sky of grey clouds. The snow had stopped during the night. Yet the cold remained. A sharp, bitter cold that seemed to settle over the kingdom like a warning. Inside the palace, servants whispered nervously. Nobles hurried through decorated corridors. Guards stood at attention. Everyone was moving toward the same destination. The Grand Court Hall. Today, the entire kingdom would witness judgment. And at the center of it stood a frightened Omega girl named Lira. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined hundreds of faces staring at her. Accusing her. Condemning her. Turning against her. Now that nightmare was becoming reality. A palace servant arrived outside her chamber. It is time. The words felt heavier than stone. Lira slowly stood. Her hands trembled. The wolves immediately rose beside her. Alert. Protective. As if they understood something was wrong. Maybe they did. Animals often sensed danger before humans. Lira looked at them. A sad smile touched her lips. I'll be okay. The words sounded weak. Even to her. One wolf nudged her hand gently. The simple gesture almost brought tears to her eyes. Because lately, the wolves seemed to trust her more than people did. And that realization hurt. Together they walked through the palace. Every corridor felt longer than usual. Every step felt heavier. Servants stopped what they were doing, watching her pass. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked suspicious. Many looked afraid. Nobody knew what to believe anymore. The rumors had spread too far. Some people thought she was blessed. Others believed she was cursed. Many believed she was dangerous. The uncertainty poisoned everything. As Lira approached the Grand Court Hall, she heard the crowd before she saw it. Hundreds of voices. Hundreds of conversations. Hundreds of opinions. All discussing her. The large doors opened. Instantly silence swept across the chamber. Lira froze. The sight stole her breath. The hall was packed. Nobles filled every seat. Advisors stood along the walls. Royal guards lined the room. Citizens from the kingdom occupied the upper galleries. Everyone had come. Everyone wanted answers. Everyone wanted to see the Omega who had somehow gained the loyalty of the sacred wolves. Lira suddenly felt very small. Very alone. At the far end of the hall sat King Kael. His throne stood above everyone else. His expression remained unreadable. Cold. Calm. Controlled. As always. Beside him stood Luna Selene. Elegant. Beautiful. Confident. The perfect picture of royalty. Anyone looking at her would never suspect the darkness hidden beneath her smile. The wolves entered behind Lira. The reaction was immediate. Gasps filled the hall. Several people moved backward. The wolves ignored everyone. They walked directly beside Lira, stopping only when she stopped, protecting only her. The display unsettled many people, including Selene. For a brief moment, irritation flashed across her face. Then it vanished. The hearing began. A royal advisor stepped forward. His voice echoed through the chamber. This hearing has been called to investigate extraordinary events involving the sacred royal wolves. Murmurs spread through the crowd. The advisor continued. Questions have arisen regarding the actions of the Omega servant known as Lira. More whispers. More tension. Lira lowered her gaze. Every eye remained fixed on her. The advisor turned. Lunar Selene has requested permission to present concerns before the court. Kael gave a slight nod. Selene stepped forward. Graceful. Confident. Prepared. The room immediately focused on her. My king. She bowed elegantly, then turned toward the crowd. Her voice carried perfectly. Clear. Powerful. Controlled. For 100 years, the sacred wolves have rejected every attempt at contact. She paused, allowing everyone to remember. The attacks. The fear. The legends. Then she continued. And yet suddenly, without explanation, they have accepted a servant. Her eyes settled on Lira. The question before us is simple. Silence filled the hall. How? The word hung in the air. Dangerous. Accusing. Effective. Selene slowly walked across the floor. Did an untrained Omega accomplish what generations of Alphas could not? She shook her head. Or is there another explanation? The crowd stirred uneasily. Fear was already growing. Exactly as Selene intended. I believe there is. The hall became silent once more. Selene turned dramatically. Facing the nobles. Facing the citizens. Facing the kingdom. I believe forbidden magic is involved. The room exploded. Gasps. Whispers. Shock. Fear. Exactly the reaction Selene wanted. Lyra's eyes widened. What? Her voice barely escaped. Forbidden magic. The accusation felt absurd. Yet nobody was laughing. Nobody was dismissing it. Because fear rarely cared about logic. Selene continued. The wolves' behavior cannot be explained naturally. She gestured toward them. They follow her. The crowd watched. They protect her. More murmurs. They obey her. The accusation struck hard. Because from the outside, it almost looked true. The wolves remained beside Lira. Refusing to leave. Refusing to abandon her. The evidence appeared convincing. Even if the conclusion was false. Selene smiled slightly. Then delivered another blow. I have witnesses. Lyra's stomach dropped. Witnesses. The doors opened. One by one, people entered. Servants. Workers. Citizens. Faces Lira barely recognized. Each prepared to testify. Each prepared to lie. The first witness stepped forward. A palace servant. He bowed. Then spoke. I saw the Omega talking to strange creatures in the forest. The crowd reacted immediately. Lira stared. That never happened. The second witness approached. I witnessed her drawing symbols near the stables. Another lie. The third witness claimed she collected unusual herbs. The fourth claimed she spoke to animals. The fifth claimed she performed rituals beneath moonlight. Every accusation sounded more ridiculous than the last. Yet something terrifying was happening. People were believing them. Because lies repeated often enough begin to sound like truth. Especially when fear is involved. Lira wanted to scream. Wanted to deny everything. Wanted to defend herself. But each new witness drowned her deeper. The wolves grew restless. Low growls vibrated through the hall. Several guards tightened their grip on their weapons. The atmosphere became increasingly dangerous. Selene noticed. And smiled. Everything was proceeding perfectly. Eventually the final witness stepped away. The hall buzzed with conversation. Fear filled every corner. The advisor raised his hand. Silence returned. Then he looked toward Lira. "You may respond." Every eye turned toward her. The moment felt overwhelming. Lyra's heart pounded. Her throat tightened. Fear threatened to consume her. Yet somehow she found the strength to stand. Slowly, carefully, alone. The wolves moved closer. Protective, loyal. The sight gave her courage. Just enough. Lira inhaled deeply, then spoke. "Everything they said is false." The room remained silent. She continued. "I never used magic." No reaction. "I never controlled the wolves." Still silence. Tears threatened to appear. But she forced herself to continue. "I found them wounded." Her voice shook. They were dying. The memory returned instantly. Blood. Snow. Pain. Fear. "I helped them because they were hurt." Several nobles exchanged skeptical looks. Lira saw it. The doubt. The suspicion. The judgment. Yet she kept speaking. "That's all." The words echoed softly. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. For several long seconds, silence ruled the hall. Then laughter erupted. Cruel laughter. Mocking laughter. Several nobles shook their heads. Others rolled their eyes. The sound cut deeper than any blade. Lira lowered her gaze. Pain burned inside her chest. She was telling the truth. Yet truth seemed powerless here. Selene stepped forward again. Her expression full of false sympathy. Such a touching story. More laughter. Then her voice hardened. "But impossible." The crowd nodded. Many already agreed. Because believing in kindness felt harder than believing in manipulation. Selene knew that. And she used it masterfully. The hearing continued. Hour after hour. Question after question. Accusation after accusation. Every answer Lira gave seemed ignored. Every lie received attention. Gradually the atmosphere turned hostile. Very hostile. People stopped asking whether she was guilty. They started assuming she was. The shift terrified her. And still Kael remained silent. Watching. Listening. Observing. His expression never changed. That silence hurt more than anything. Part of Lira had hoped he might intervene. That he might speak. That he might help. Instead he sat motionless. A king observing judgment. Nothing more. The realization felt like betrayal. Eventually one noble stood. Then another. Then another. Calls for punishment began spreading. She is dangerous. She corrupted the wolves. The kingdom must be protected. Fear transformed into anger. Anger transformed into demands. And demands transformed into something far worse. One elderly noble rose from his seat. His voice echoed clearly. "If forbidden magic is involved." The hall grew quiet. The man looked toward Lira. Then delivered the sentence. The punishment should be death. Everything stopped. Lira felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Death. The word echoed endlessly. Death. 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 The crowd reacted instantly. Some agreed. Others looked shocked. Many remained silent. The wolves exploded with fury. A thunderous growl shook the chamber. People screamed. Several guards stumbled backward. The wolves moved directly in front of Lira. Golden eyes blazing. Protective. Dangerous. Terrifying. The message was clear. No one would touch her. Not while they stood. The hall descended into chaos. People shouted. Guards rushed forward. Nobles panicked. Fear consumed the room. Through it all, Lira remained frozen. Death. Someone had just called for her death. And too many people seemed willing to agree. For the first time since finding the wolves, true despair touched her heart. Because she finally understood something. The kingdom wasn't interested in truth. The kingdom wanted someone to blame. Someone to fear. Someone to sacrifice. And she was the perfect target. An omega. A servant. A nobody. The easiest person to condemn. Above the chaos, Kael finally stood. Instant silence followed. The Alpha King's presence alone was enough. The crowd obeyed instantly. Fearfully. Respectfully. Kael's gaze swept across the hall. Then settled briefly on Lira. For a moment, something flickered behind his eyes. Something unreadable. Then it vanished. The hearing was suspended. No verdict would be delivered today. Not yet. The announcement relieved some people. Angered others. But everyone obeyed. Slowly the crowd began dispersing. Conversations exploded immediately. Rumors growing even larger. Fear spreading even further. The damage had been done. And Selene knew it. As she left the hall, satisfaction filled her chest. Lira wasn't destroyed yet. But she was close. Very close. The kingdom doubted her. The nobles feared her. The crowd questioned her. Everything was moving exactly as planned. Meanwhile Lira remained standing where she was. Alone. Broken. Exhausted. The wolves stayed beside her. The only creatures who hadn't turned away. Tears finally slipped down her face. Silent. Unstoppable. Because no matter how brave she tried to be, she was still human. And today the entire kingdom had stood against her. What she didn't know was that fate had other plans. Because before judgment could be delivered, before another accusation could be spoken, before Selene could complete her victory, disaster was already approaching. A disaster that would change everything. A disaster made of fire. And within that fire, an Omega girl would soon make a choice that no one else dared make. A choice that would force the entire kingdom to see her true heart.